okay. It's
I'll
okay.
keep that up. I'm going to have to go to the bathroom.
Once you start the intro, you can't reset it. So you have to let it play all the way through.
Gotcha.
And I have 2 minutes and 20 seconds of you guys' intro because I need some time so I can fade it out.
Sure.
In this case, we still have 5 more seconds.
Do you need to go to the bathroom?
I'm okay right now.
Okay.
We're starting recording on the mixer in 5, 4, 3.
Some people in this world are on the front lines of the struggle between good and evil, and some, like us, bear witness. I'm Therese Apel.
And I'm Nicole Crowell. You may have heard us as we worked on stories and series about law enforcement and crime. And it's safe to say we've seen some of the best and worst of human nature.
We decided there's no greater honor than bringing you the stories of the men and women who seek out the monsters, who speak for the victims, and who put the pieces together on some of the biggest Mississippi crime stories of our time. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Investigation Homicide. We are glad to have you back. The holidays were great, but they were long.
They were.
Nicole, how was your holiday?
It was wonderful. We had a lot of family time this year. We had everybody over at our house. We did about 17 Christmases, drove up and down all over the state for about 2 or 3 weeks, and now we're here. So, and I feel very good. I feel refreshed. I feel ready for the new year. I feel like we're going to accomplish big things this year.
Sure. And a lot of you guys were asking why we didn't have podcasts during the holidays. And that's because trying to get everything done during the holidays, we all know how that goes. And we just wanted to make sure that we could give you the best time we possibly could. And so today it's always a special guest, but this one's extra special. We've got retired Copiah County Sheriff, also a former state trooper, retired state trooper, Harold Jones. Sheriff, we go way back.
We do.
We have been friends for a long time, and there have been several cases that we worked together on.
Absolutely. I remember when you lived in Copiah County.
That's right. So talk to me. Tell us, give the audience a little bit about your career. Tell us who you are.
Okay. I grew up in McGee, Mississippi, graduated, went to United States Army. Ended up being a first lieutenant in Vietnam, served a year there with the mortuary system. I was a mortician. I went to mortuary school. Came out, went in the Army, and then they sent me to Vietnam to run the mortuary at night. So got through with that, got home. I really didn't want to get back in the funeral business after what I'd seen in Vietnam, so I decided I'd get on Mississippi Highway Patrol. And with the help of some of my friends, my Baptist preacher, a couple of my Highway Patrol buddies, and I got on the Highway Patrol, served 26 straight years, from trooper to helicopter, airplane pilot, assistant director of air operations off Hawkins Field here in Jackson. After that, I became a probation officer in Copiah County for 6.5 years, and then I had the silly notion to run for sheriff down there, and 16 years later, I was still the sheriff. So you were there during some of that time, so you know some of the things that we went through.
That's right. We definitely saw a whole lot during that time. I started off, I had come from North Mississippi. I was at the Daily Leader in Brookhaven when we really got to know each other, I think.
Yep.
And then moved on from there to the Clarion Ledger, and we continued to work together. Some of the big cases that we worked on together, some of them are some of the landmark cases in my career, to be honest. We talked about David Dickerson, who was a guy that had been stalking all these women by writing them letters. And Sheriff, tell us about that case briefly.
Well, he had been married, and he and his ex-wife were, of course, separated, and she lived up down on what they call Monticello Road. He lived up in central Copiah County, up close to Hazlehurst, out Dentville Road. But he decided he was going to go down there one day, and he was going to poison the animals, from what my investigators told me. And they saw him outside, so he got inside the house where his wife and children were, and he was trying to beat her up, and she ran from him and ran out the back door to a little mobile home where some people were staying, a little camper trailer. And he shot her 2 or maybe 3 times. I can't remember now. It's been a good while. And then he wasn't satisfied that was enough, so he tried to cut her head off, and he almost decapitated her. And she fell there under that trailer, and he doused her with gas and set her on fire. And then we had the preachers there that were passing by and pulled up in there and saw what was happening. And Dickerson, of course, he hit the woods, and from Monticello Road to Beauregard Road's about a mile, but they're sort of parallel each other. Dickerson ran through there and got on Monticello Road. On Beauregard Road, got a old empty gas can out of a house, and was going to steal a vehicle. And Mr. McGinnis was the man's name that he was going to probably beat him in the head and steal his vehicle. Mr. McGinnis was a nice man and decided he was going to give the boy some gas. Well, the can had a hole in it, the old plastic, but he didn't see that. But just so happened that I was just up the hill from where he was, and one of my deputies was right there in the driveway, and we took him into custody there before he had a chance to hurt Mr. McGinnis.
I remember that day because we had heard about this horrible crime. And so the media came down. We were all standing out there in front of that trailer. And actually, that's the photo that we used in the video that preceded this podcast. That was from that day.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was a big deal. And then you guys finally got him into custody. You got a good conviction on him. He went to death row, correct?
I took him personally.
You drove him to death row.
I did.
What did y'all talk about on that ride?
I didn't have a whole lot to say to him. I'd let him sit in the back, and had his waist chains on, belly chains on, seatbelt on, and I just took him to Parchment, me and one of my investigators.
Sure. Well, and the personal note on that, and, just being a crime reporter is a weird job. But I got some letters from him once he got into prison.
Icky.
Yeah. Not something
Don't like that.
Not something you're excited about.
One thing about Dickerson that I know, at one time he worked at a supermarket in Byram, and he was a butcher. And I was up there one day picking up some groceries or doing something, and I noticed somebody just looking at me. And he was sort of standing back there like the little cowboy that you see and just looking at me. And then finally he spoke my name because he knew who I was. Mm-hmm. This way before all this happened with his wife and everything. But he was a stalker, and he was a very strange individual.
I remember one of the women that he had stalked at one point. When I talked to her, she described him as almost demonic, that there was just something dark about him that was very frightening.
I would agree to that.
I would too. Another case that we worked on together, and I'll never forget this, it was the murder of Denman Ward, whose son, Chad O'Quinn, was the Wesson police chief.
Right.
He ran a pawn shop there in Wesson.
He did.
A guy named Eric Hawley felt like he was on a mission from God. Tell us that story.
He went in there and he shot that man at least 6 times. And, of course, it killed him. And Chad was in Afghanistan at the time.
I remember that.
And we talked on the phone, but it took us a little while to find out who it was. And we got the evidence, and so we knew who we were looking for. And I had spoken to his mother and told her, if you know where he's at, you need to get him to us. We try not to hurt him if at all possible. But when we have a face-to-face with him, if we have to, we're going to have, take him into custody, hurt him, whatever it takes. And sure enough, he pulled up to the Wesson Police Department one night about, I can't remember, about 10 or 11 o'clock. They had to call me out. We got everybody down there. He was just sitting in his little truck. He had a little Bible in his hands, but he had weapons all in that truck. And we got a game plan, and I told him, I said, I'm going to see if he'll meet me in the road, and I'm going to inject his mother's name into it. And I told him, I said, Eric, I told your mother that I wouldn't hurt you if we didn't have to, but we need to talk. You need to, throw some weapons out of that car. He put a pistol out on the ground, but he still had 2 or 3 more weapons in the car. But he met me in the middle of the road, and when he did, we got him into custody and took him into custody.
I remember that night because we had been there. Again, the media had been there all day. And a comical piece of this is we're in Wesson, Mississippi, town of what, 800, 1,000, something like that. And
on a Wesson flea market.
Yeah,
day.
exactly. Like on a big day, 800, 1,000 people. But the whole media is there. We've even got, I want to say there was some national media there. And as we're all standing there on the square right across from the pawn shop, a guy rides by on a horse. and it's in everybody's shot. So it's like, here's this legitimate little one-horse town. You know?
It is.
Welcome to Mississippi.
Yeah.
I love that.
It was
That's
good.
cute.
Well, and so that kind of brings me around because I'll never forget that night that you said, all right, I'm going to go confront him. We're going to get this taken care of. And he wasn't going to talk to anybody else. And so you really put your life on the line that night.
Oh yeah, that was stupid on my part. But I had some real good guys that had my back, you know. So that means a whole lot.
Well, and to me, that kind of brings me around to what we're here to talk about today. Nicole, do you want to
Yes.
introduce the story since
Sure,
I've done all the
I
talking
would
so
love
far?
to. Absolutely. So today we're doing a story. It is about Sheriff Posey from Franklin County. There was this guy, and he had a pretty bad history we're going to go into. He had done a few bad things, and he was waiting for his trial. And he kidnapped, essentially, a mother, her 2 children, and a baby that they were babysitting, and took them, held them hostage, and he was caught up at a roadblock eventually that same afternoon. And Sheriff Posey, I don't know how to explain the
I can explain.
sacrifice that he made that day. He sacrificed himself in exchange for those victims. And unfortunately, he lost his life in that altercation. And we're here to tell that story in depth and detail today. So thank you very much, Sheriff Jones, for being here today.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that day started for you, or I'm sorry, were you working that case?
I was on a federal program. I was running radar on old 84 highway. That was a 4-lane at the time. Some of it was 2 lanes, some of it was 4-lane back in the day. And we got a call from the substation that said we had a hostage situation coming out of Franklin County on the back
Okay.
roads around West Lincoln School. Well, I happened to be at the Auburn crossing, they call it, and you take a right and you're at the West Lincoln School. And I went down there not really knowing where the car was coming from, but I happened to be on the right road, and I saw the car coming at a pretty good rate of speed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had my patrol car, and I blocked the whole road because it was a little county road. And these 2 ladies were in the front seat, and this guy was in the back seat. It was a Ford Thunderbird, one of them old long hood Thunderbirds. And the lady, I stopped the car, told everybody where we were, and the unit started coming to me. And initially what we were going to do was we knew that the guy's name was Darrell Coughlin.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that he was going to wanted to see Judge Pygott, the circuit judge, because I think Pygott had sentenced him to some drug treatment, in-house drug treatment, and he didn't want to go. And that was the reason I think all this predicated all this.
Now, can I stop you there and
Sure.
ask you, what did you know, if anything? I mean, I know in that area, because I'm from down that way too, everyone kind of knows everybody. Did you know anything about Darrell Coughlin before this?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I wasn't really a trooper in I think he was out of Pike County originally. I'm not really sure about that, but you know, I trooped out at Franklin County occasionally, but most of my highway patrolling was on Natchez, Adams County roads. But I was on that special detail that day, and so Posey had went to the scene where the initial kidnapping started, so he was late getting to where we were, where I made the stop. And we had like 7 or 8 highway patrolmen there, and Posey's car was on the other side. So James came up to me, and a little bit about Sheriff Posey that I want to interject. He owned a body shop before he became a sheriff, but he kept that body shop open after he was a sheriff. And he was the kind of guy that if you needed a sandwich late at night in Franklin County, you were working, you went to his house and he'd fix you one, or his wife. If you scratched your highway patrol car and you didn't want the substation to know about it, James Posey would take care of it for you. He was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he was a real good friend of mine.
Now,
So-
let me interject
Okay.
too with something that I read about, and I didn't know this about Sheriff Posey, but he was one of those guys that he just had a real even keel demeanor, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
And it was the understanding that I got was that he was the guy that when everything was kind of going haywire, you could bring him in and he could diffuse the situation. And one of the articles I read was a guy that was running against him that was just real mad at everything he had done, and real mad that he wasn't putting all the drunks in jail. And Sheriff Posey was like, if I had to put all the drunks in jail, I wouldn't have room for everybody else. Because basically, the way the liquor laws were, people were having to drive to Natchez to get their liquor and then drive back to Franklin
That's
County.
right.
Oh,
So he was like, if you guys would have let us sell liquor here, all our drunks wouldn't be on the road; they'd be at their house. So there was a lot of that stuff going on. It was just interesting to me to see his candor and kind of see his sense of humor, but also just see how this guy's trying to attack him, and he was just kind of like, "Look, man, it's not my problem." He seemed like just a real agreeable guy.
Oh, he was. And if you get a side shot of him, he had his little pistol on, and he would act like Buford Pusser. I mean, he dressed like him. He just wore all kind of different crazy clothes, and he was just down to earth. But to get back into the little story, he came up to me and he said, Harold, he said, I think I'm going to exchange myself for those women. And he said, I know this old boy. I said, James, I said, that's cardinal rule. You don't do that. He said, oh, man, I can talk him down. I said, well, look, I got an extra life jacket. I'm a, bulletproof vest. And you take it. Oh, man, I don't need that. I know this old boy. I said, okay. So he goes up, and Coughlin's drinking those little Miller Steinies, the little Miller bottles, about 6 or 8 ounces, and smoking a cigarette. He wanted a cigarette, and James gave him one. And so they get out, and Coughlin just sticks the gun in Posey's side, and they just walking toward Posey's car. And so the other trooper and myself, we'd just gotten the Mini 14 rifles that the state had given us. So we were level out on him, and Posey didn't do anything but go to the car. And back in those days, the state trooper cars, we had all kind of junk in our cars, blue boxes, everything. But the sheriffs normally just had the radio head, and the radio was in the back, and it was just a bench seat in the front. And that's the way Posey's car was. And Coughlin got in the car first on his side, on the driver's side, holding the gun on Posey. And so when he got in, Posey was going to get in. Well, I knew that we were fitting to have to give pursuit because Posey was going to have to go that way and turn around and head out. So the other trooper and myself turned around and were going to our cars because we were blocking everybody. And I think I know what Posey did. He was a big guy, and Coughlin wasn't a very big guy. So James probably, when he put his car in reverse, act like he was looking over his shoulder, he probably tried to knock the gun up. Well, there was 2 shots that went off. Bam, bam, just like that. And the trooper that was with me and myself, we turned around, and the car had stopped, and Posey's door, the driver's door, just flew open. And James stepped out of that car, and his legs were like rubber bands. And he looked at me with a big old hole in his chest, and he said, Harold, I can't believe that SOB shot me. And he fell dead at my feet. And 15 seconds later, we took care of Mr. Coughlin. Now, that story's good, but the good part about this is, and my wife wanted me to tell this, fast forward, I'm probation and parole in Copiah County. I'm retired highway patrol, and I'm in Brookhaven. It's a Walmart one day in the garden center. Civilian clothes. I got my pistol on. I'm a probation officer. This lady tugs on my arm. She says, sir, she said, were you ever on the highway patrol? I said, yes, ma'am, I was. She said, you remember me? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. You're the passenger in that car when I stopped you. She said, yeah. She said, but did you see this boy standing by me? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, he was in my lap.
That was the baby?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Sure was.
So it was a mother, and I think she was in her 40s, about 41, and then she had 2 kids with her.
See, I never saw the children. I was interested in just him.
Right.
And then to find out that they were there, and he wasn't real big, but he's grown up a good bit. Been 17, 18 years.
What did you say to each other when you...
Oh, we hugged.
Yeah. How emotional, I bet.
It was.
Yeah. Did he, I mean, it was a baby,
He was
right?
a little bit, yeah.
Baby.
I never saw him. He was in her lap, so I didn't see him.
Well, and when you think about your career, can you think of a time in law enforcement that was more I can't think of a good word, but that was more important or more impactful than that day?
No, it makes you really realize how truly fragile life is, and you need to cherish it. You really do.
What do you think that sacrifice said about Sheriff Posey?
Oh, it told you exactly the kind of person he had always, the way he lived. He died the way he lived. He was serving his people.
One of the stories that I learned, just to talk about how I found out about this story, I was at the Daily Leader. It was probably the first year that I was there, and I got a call around September 27th or 28th, and somebody said, "Did you know that the anniversary of the death of Sheriff James Posey is coming?" And I said, "Who's that?" And so this person tells me the story, and all of a sudden I was like, I need to write this, even though at that point it was 20 something years later.
Yeah.
It was still something that, like, I was so moved by that sacrifice of his. I mean, how many people would do that? And so one of the things I learned that day was that President Reagan called and spoke to his kids and actually quoted John 15:13, "Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends." He may have written that in a letter, as a matter of fact, but I do know that he called them. And to me, that's what this whole story's about.
I have a copy of that letter.
Do you?
I do. I sure do.
Well, if you send us a picture of it, we'll put it on
I think
the
I've still got it. I'd have to
socials.
find it. But
Yeah.
I pretty much know I got it.
Wow.
Well, and so how did that day change your career?
Well, it made me a whole lot more aware of, things that are happening around us. Of course, we had another trooper, Danny Nash. He got killed in Franklin County, and I'd had a coffee with him that afternoon in Natchez. He came over to Natchez to pick up some supplies. We had a little mini substation, and I had a key to it, and he needed some accident reports or check ticket books or something. I don't know. But anyway, we went to Holiday Inn, had some coffee, and 4 hours later, let's see, we had 5 o'clock, and he got killed about 9:30.
That's
Yeah.
one of the things that I think a lot of people don't recognize about law enforcement. And it's not just today, it's been in all of history. You go into this job knowing that you will lose friends to
Absolutely.
line of duty situations. What's that like, knowing that? Every day getting up knowing today could be another day like that.
Well, let me just give you a little way I think about it. I have a friend of mine that I ride motorcycles. I used to. And every time I'd ride a motorcycle, everybody says, I'm not going to ride them. I'm scared. You cannot live your life scared. You need to be situation aware at all times, especially in law enforcement. Don't ever sit with your back to the door. Always know who's in there, and just be situational, and appreciate each and every day. And I do every day.
And tell me a little bit about just kind of as you've gone through, like, I realize that you had kind of a different start than a lot of law enforcement, but a lot do start as soldiers, as military.
Absolutely.
What did that do as far as just kind of shaping who you were as a law enforcement officer?
Well, when you go through Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, it finds out whether you got some metal in your bones or not. So when I got out of the military and got ready to go to the Highway Patrol Academy, it was a 13-week academy, and everybody said, "Man, they're gonna kill you up there." Well, you 23 weeks at Fort Benning, Georgia is nothing. I was ready for the Highway Patrol Academy. Had a good time up there, made some wonderful friends, and I've lost some that were in my patrol school. As you go through Collins, Mississippi, Billy M. Langham, Memorial Highway, he was my bunkmate. We rode to patrol school every Sunday afternoon. You lose people like that, and he was just as good a friend of mine as it ever was. And he lost his life, at the hands of some bad people.
What does it mean to you to have been able to make it all the way through to retirement?
I didn't believe I was going to make it. I'm so proud I'm here, Got a little medical problems going on, but hey, that's okay. As the guy said, it's a wonderful life. I have had I call it a wonderful ride, because I ended up getting to fly. I couldn't fly in the military because my eyesight wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I get on the Highway Patrol and later get in the aviation unit, and one of my patrol school classmates, well, two of them, He's the head unit in aviation, Bobby Meadows. He taught me everything I needed to know to advance my career when he retired. And Eddie Belvedresse, if you know Eddie Belvedresse, he was the Toby Trowbridge's chief deputy at one time. Eddie was my boss, but we were always patrol schoolmates. And we all flew those airplanes and helicopters. I got to fly Hueys, Jet Rangers, multi-engine airplanes, and my career just really blossomed after that.
Absolutely.
It was fun.
Well, and I was looking to see if we had any comments or any questions so far. Guys, remember that if you're watching, you can ask questions in the comments, and we'll see them at least while we're here. But I did get a text from Sheriff Rushing in Lincoln County.
Oh, Lord.
Sheriff Steve Rushing.
Buddy.
He was in high school or maybe not in high school, but he lived not far from where Sheriff Posey was killed.
I think I saw him run out of the house in diapers.
It's probably like that.
He'll
Yeah.
love it when
I just realized he's about my age, so he wouldn't quite be in high school yet.
He told me later on after we, talked about this. He said, "Yeah, that happened right close to my home." But he and I are just super, super close friends. I mean, really are. He was president of the Sheriff Association, so was I at one time, and we've got that in common. And he's making Lincoln County a good sheriff.
He is doing a good job.
Absolutely.
He's a fun guy.
Yeah. So looking up there, we just see several people that wanted to say hello to you and Jerry.
Love
Sheriff
you,
Jones'
Harold.
wife Jerry is here in the studio with us. You can't see her, but she's here with us
She
as
is
well.
here. She's wonderful.
Well, Sheriff, the face of law enforcement has changed since
Absolutely.
you got started, and even almost since you retired. I mean, it's changed so fast, and it's become such a different place. Talk to me about if you had to give advice. Say you had, a younger protege, someone who might be looking at going into law enforcement now. What would your advice be?
I would not discourage them. Just go in it knowing what you're doing. Yeah, make sure you're aware of what you're doing and learn as much as you can from the people that are going to teach you, because law enforcement now has changed immensely from when we were there. You go into classes all the time to get upgraded on everything, and you have the FBI people, and I like the FBI. They help me out a whole lot, and they put on programs that you can train your deputies for. And anytime you have an opportunity to go to training or advance yourself, take it, and it'll serve you well.
Do you feel like the world is more dangerous now for law enforcement than it was, or are we just hearing about it more?
No, it's more dangerous. You think about it right now. Back in the day when I was on the road, I worked from Natchez to Fayette on Highway 61, 2-lane road by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we didn't have tinted windows. That's one of the things that I would wish the legislature would address right now, and the Mississippi Highway Patrol would get busy, and the deputies and the police departments, and make sure these people that have these tinted windows have a doctor's excuse or wherever they need to do it. If not, write them a ticket and make them take it off, because you're going to walk up to that car and you can't see what's in that car. And that is scary. And that's when you need to be situational aware.
And that's been the cause of death for a lot of law enforcement
Absolutely.
officers who have been shot on what they like to call a routine traffic stop.
Routine traffic stop. That'll get you every time. That, and when you answering the call for domestic violence, the man and the wife that's having the domestic violence will turn it on you every time. And be mad at you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and to kind of bring it back to where we were, Daniel, would you mind putting the picture of the front page of the Enterprise Journal up for us? So I just wanted our audience to see this. This was the Enterprise Journal the day after Sheriff Posey was killed, and the Clarion Ledger front page looked a lot like this too. I looked him up this morning. And mostly I kind of want to, before we go, I want to bring it back around to that because, like I said, I wasn't there. I read about it years later, and it changed my life. And I just want to ask you, when you were walking up to Eric Hawley's car in the middle of the road that night, and I mean, like I said, I remember being there. I remember, waiting to see what was going to happen that night if you guys were going to take him into custody. We knew he was crazy. We knew all this stuff was going on. We knew he had shot Denman Ward, and we knew that he was not in his right mind.
Mm-hmm.
Did Sheriff Posey come into your mind as you walked up to that car?
Not really.
Not really.
I was trying to think about what I was concentrating on Holly. and getting him in custody.
Did you ever think about it and
Later
connect
on,
it?
later on. And then Chad called me at long distance from Afghanistan. And that night when I got home,
Yeah.
about 2:00 in the morning.
Well, and what did that mean to you too? It wasn't just someone that lived in your area, but it was the father of one of the police chiefs in your area,
Yeah,
and probably was he a friend of yours?
Who?
Either one of them, both.
Chad?
Yeah.
He was. Chad worked for me for 16 years. He
I
was one of
remember
the
that
first
now,
people
yeah.
I hired. He was my interstate drug interdiction guy. And he's been my friend forever, his whole family.
And did you know Denman?
I knew of him, not that well. I didn't go in that store that much.
Sure. Well, and his wife Ursula is still a friend of mine on Facebook. We
Yeah.
still talk to. I mean, in the way that you do on Facebook.
He did not. He didn't need to die like that. That was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Well, okay. Is there anything you want to ask about, Nicole?
I think that experience itself is just life changing, and I every time somebody comes on here, all I can say is I really can't imagine, because I really can't. I'm not in the law enforcement field. I'm not, me and Tara started Dark Horse together, but I'm not a reporter by nature. I do the happy story, so stuff like this really does impact me in a way that just hearing firsthand accounts. And I think that all of our listeners are very grateful for those opportunities to hear these stories from people and hear it from firsthand accounts and just hear the emotion behind your voices. And we're just, very grateful that you would be here today. And I just want to shout out your Corvette. He's got, I pulled up today and this man, I said, who was driving that? And then I saw Daniel has to chime in on that. I couldn't let this podcast end without shouting out your vet.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, gorgeous. You absolutely deserve it.
Thank you.
You deserve all the joy and the happiness in your life. And thank
She's
you
sitting
so
right over
much.
there.
He
Oh, that was
has
amazing.
complimented Jerry like 12 times since we've been sitting here.
They are
These
the perfect
45
couple.
minutes.
I've watched this thing
And
since it began.
every credit that we try to give him, he automatically goes to Jerry. So
There she is.
there she is. Look, say hi.
Yeah.
Wonderful. But again, thank you so much for being here. I feel like there's so much more to this story. There's like a whole series of events before, but ultimately it just shows the sacrifice that law enforcement does make every single day. And we all kind of need to make sure that we recognize that when we're judging situations that we see on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram.
Absolutely. Can I tell you just a cute story?
Sure.
Yeah.
Law enforcement story?
We love cute stories.
All right. Jimmy Carter just passed away.
Sure.
Rosalind Carter, his wife. When he was running for president, I was a young rookie trooper. We didn't have any 4-lane roads back in the day. It was all 2 lanes between Natchez and Vicksburg. So I was tasked by the substation to pick her up at the Holiday Inn in Natchez, or the Ramada Inn up on the hill overlooking the river, and taking her to Vicksburg and have her at Vicksburg, I think the Holiday Inn, by 5 o'clock. So I pick her up. I got a little Dodge Highway Patrol car, and we're heading up 61 North, and the station calls me and says, "Do I know where the Evers Lounge is in Fayette, Mississippi?" I said, "Yeah, I live here." So said, "Well, Charles Evers wanted me to bring her by there and let them ask her a few questions. He had a bunch of people in the lounge." So I realized at the time that I was going to be behind the power curve on getting her to Vicksburg by 5 o'clock. Sure enough, 45 minutes later, she comes out of that lounge, and I put her in that Dodge Charger or Dodge car and head north. It's the old 2-lane road, kudzu, all up through Port Gibson, North Port Gibson. And I slide her in there about 5 minutes to 5 at the Holiday Inn. And when I get Miss Carter out, she looks at me. I said, "Miss Carter," I said, "I got you here, ma'am. You okay?" She said, "Yes, Trooper Jones, I'm fine. But I want you to know you're scared to live, and you know what out of it." And to this day, I can see her until she died. That just tickled me to death. That's the light side of
yeah.
that. And one more.
Memory.
We had we were doing a helicopter run one day. We're training, me and Charles Scarborough, and we landed for lunch. Had fueled the helicopter up. Going to go that afternoon. Had the doors off of it. We were just going to go do training, and we had a lost child in Lexington, which is not far from Jackson in a helicopter. It's 20 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. So we get up there, and it's like a baby that has pull-up diapers on, and so the whole community's out there walking arm in arm, so I know that they're going to find him. And so I decided we were going to go check the ponds and around. And the little boy had supposedly had some dogs with him. So checked a couple, 2 or 3 ponds, and I popped up and I looked and I saw 2 dogs out in the middle of a little field. So I went to where they were and I hovered down. The little boy was over under a tree and he was sleeping. The helicopter scared him. So I popped back up and called the local sheriff, told him come to where the helicopter is, bring somebody for this little boy. And they got him. So I decided, since the helicopter had scared him, I'd go to his house, and we landed, and I was going to let him come out and look at it. When I got in the house, the mother had that boy in a high chair feeding him Bluebell ice cream, and that boy, and I said, ma'am, if you keep doing that, he's going to run away every day. But that's a good story, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Well, and then I'll tell a story about Copiah County. And I teach a class now for public information officers for law enforcement. And one of the stories I always tell them is take care of your locals first. And it's because there was a case you probably will remember where a carload of, I think, 3 teenagers had disappeared. There was these 3 boys had just disappeared. Nobody knew where they were. And at some point, their car is found in the water under a bridge. And so it was cold out there. It was rainy. It was 5. That's right. Oh, gosh.
I can take you right to the spot.
Yeah, and I've still got pictures in my Facebook of it. But so I had been there with you guys since you found it, pulling all the stuff out. And this is the funny side. So, I look like a drowned rat. We're all cold. It's, the sun had just come up, I guess. And WLBT gets there. It was this beautiful reporter named Julie Straw, and she is so well put together, and she's got all her makeup on, and she looks like $100 million, and she just comes strutting up there. And I like Julie. I'm not making fun of her, but she made a statement just by being there. Every head on that scene turns. And it's like watching Julie. And I'm over here like, hey, what am I, chopped liver? Sheriff, I remember you were the one that didn't go over there and fawn all over Julie. And when I tell that story, I'm like, guys, this is how you don't do it. Like, that girl that's going to be in your face tomorrow about whatever happens next, take care of her first. Yep. The one that looks like a drowned rat, that's right. She's your priority. Yep.
I was trying to take care of Ellis Stewart. I didn't want him to fall over and hurt himself.
That's right.
He was our coroner, that day. Bless his heart, he helped me a lot. Ellis Stewart, just a wealth of information in the FBI Academy and chief of police in Hazelhurst. I used to bounce stuff off of him all the time.
Oh, I love talking to Ellis. He is a wealth of information.
We're still good friends. Yeah. Good friends.
Good. Well, Sheriff, is there anything you'd want to add before we let you go? We really appreciate your being here.
I'm about ready to get home and watch Ole Miss play.
Yes,
absolutely. Hotty toddy.
That's it.
I won't say it.
Yeah, Nicole is a state girl.
Good luck.
We'll forgive her for that.
Thank you guys for joining us today. If you'd like to follow us, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me or Therese. And we'll see you again next week with another wonderful story.
That's right. And don't forget Sheriff Posey.
Yes.
Thank y'all for joining us.
Yeah. Bye.